downfield for the end zone. Moore, touchdown.
With time, throws it short. Foreman with the catch. Foreman to the end zone for the touchdown. Warriors' long pass of the day is 15 yards, and it's intercepted. Picked off by Jalen Johnson. Johnson, untouched for the touchdown.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back. I know it's been a while, but we're back, guys. I mean, it's been, 3 weeks now? Stuff going on with Christmas time. It's been hectic, but we're the Willis Twin Towers, and we are back. It's good to see you guys here. We got a lot to talk about with the Bears today. So before we get started, just a reminder, guys, to please give us a follow at Barroom Network on Twitter. You can also follow me. I am at JAW0235. That is at JAW, like jaw, 0235. Tim's going to be on in a second. He was having a little bit of technical difficulties, but you can give him a follow also. He is at Tim Willis 24. So before we get started here, guys, I just kind of wanted to give a mention that, part of the reason we've been having some difficulty last couple of weeks is I actually drove back home. I live in California myself, and I drove back to Northern Indiana, South Bend area. You guys are familiar with the fact that Tim and I are Notre Dame fans. It's because we're from there, that general area. And I did drive home actually for Christmas time. So it took me a few days to get there, and then it took me a few days to get back. So there's a lot of driving involved. And I actually got sick when I was home. So we had some difficulties there also. And it just, being around with family and stuff just kind of made things hard to get together and have the episodes for you guys and stuff. But we're glad to be back. We got a lot to talk about. It's good to see all you guys, some of the regulars that we're used to seeing in the chat there. Cliff, I see, Jay Grizz. You guys, it's so good to see you guys here. I'm glad that you're with us again, as always. And yes, it definitely Mr. Mayhem, bear down. So, but like I said, before we get started, we're still kind of waiting on Tim here to get his computer fixed or his connection fixed. He was lagging on us a little bit, but I want to keep in mind today, guys, we got a lot to talk about with what's been going on with the Bears. They got the offensive coordinator situation. We have the unique draft situation. There's a lot of salary cap space that the Bears still have, but there's a bright future here. And, we do have some recapping I want to talk about a little bit from the past season. But, as always, we like to have an open dialogue with you guys, the chatters, the commenters. And I think that's a big part of this show is having you guys be a part of it. So if you guys have any questions, any relevant comments that you want to make, definitely questions that you want asked, Tim and I will be certainly happy to answer to the best of our ability and give any kind of opinions that we may have. We do have some certainly on different things that are going on. But one thing I will say is I shouldn't say never, but I'm not going to go out of my way to try to guess who all the Bears are going to draft in each round and things like that, because that's an absolute crapshoot. I'm sure there's certain guys in certain areas that they like a lot, and there could be guys at the top that they're targeting. But I'm not exactly sure what direction they're going to go with that yet. So and nobody really is. So and really the team doesn't even know for sure. As if you guys watch Gabriel Talks Football, which many of you do, our resident scout Greg Gabriel has discussed that. We don't know. We have no idea. The team doesn't know because they don't even have their final draft board set yet. It won't happen until much closer to the actual draft. So, with that being said, guys, we're not going to get, into a ton of like guessing games with stuff. We might do a mock draft here and there, but, other than that, we're not going to try to say, well, the Bears should do this and then they should trade down into this round and then they should draft that guy. And then they should trade down because I don't like the pool of guys that are in that area. We're probably not going to do a whole lot of that. So just, let me introduce Tim real quick here, guys, and then I'll kind of fill Tim on what I was talking about here. But Tim, I did introduce your Twitter and all that. So why don't you go ahead and say hi to the folks and just, explain, maybe a little bit what's going on the last couple of weeks. I kind of said that, I've been sick and I was doing the traveling and stuff. And we had, issues with, everybody being able to get together and stuff with the family. So why don't you introduce yourself and kind of talk a little bit about that stuff? Yeah, sorry guys, I was having some technical difficulties. But yeah, it's been a wild couple of weeks for sure. Wow, more like 3 or 4 weeks now. With Christmas and everything, and I'm in the busiest part of my wrestling season for my high school kids. So there's just been a lot going on. Christmas with mom's family, dad's family, my in-laws, just wild, crazy few weeks. And then with the new year and everything, and my job is very, very busy this time of year, with holidays especially. So yeah, just been wild and crazy. A lot of hours worked, not a lot of hours home. So like Jeff said, he was driving a lot of this time. So it's been a crazy time for the Willis boys, that's for sure. And as far as the Bears are going, like, it's kind of what we've talked about, like basically what we expected. Jeff and I have been on this train for weeks now that we felt like Flus was probably safe and Getsy was basically already out the door. And it's very telling to me for a few reasons, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, definitely moves that we kind of saw coming, but also happy for the moves are made because I felt like Getsy he needed to go, regardless of what you did at the quarterback position, regardless of what you did with Flus. Like, Getsy definitely needed to go. So, yep, agreed. So Jeff, where do you want to start off tonight? You want to walk into the Getsy conversation? Do you want to walk into the quarterback controversy? Where do you want to go with this?
Well,
you want to do a rundown of position groups? Where do you want to start?
Well, let's kind of save that for later on. I do think it's kind of important to address the elephant in the room, and that's, Luke Getsy getting canned. And that's, if you guys have been watching the show, you know that Tim and I have had opinions on Luke Getsy for quite some time now. And I mentioned several episodes ago now, probably a month and a half ago, that I anticipated Flus would probably stick around and Getsy was as good as gone. And I don't remember if you guys mentioned, if you guys remember me mentioning that Flus probably had to win, 3 of 5 or 4 of 6 or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I felt like he could lose 2 of the last several games that they had left and he would survive. And he did end up surviving. And I think that's exactly what ended up happening, if I'm not mistaken. So one thing I would say is, as I mentioned back as I first started talking about Getsy and how I did not think he was the answer and how things just weren't working, you guys know as well as anybody that the screen passes are an obvious thing. Everybody's going to talk about that. There were just so many screens, and they just, he would just go back to them when they weren't working time and time again. I mean, that's an obvious part. But, one thing to me that was really kind of a big issue is even when he would find things that would work, he had a tendency to just go back to the well way too often. And I had a conversation, I shouldn't say conversation, it was a little bit of a back and forth with Greg Gabriel on Twitter about that kind of thing, because I had mentioned during the last game of the season, that Getsy had kind of refused to run toss plays early in the season, like to toss plays to the running back, get outside, whatever the case may be. And he didn't do it a whole lot early in the season, and we had been asking for it because it had been working when he did. And then finally, now last game of the season, I think he ran that some form of toss play like 10 to 15 times in that game. And I'd mentioned on Twitter that, man, Getsy he didn't want to run the toss early in the season. Now he's trying to make up for it by running it 10 to 15 times today. And Greg had mentioned in a comment that, yes, he has a tendency to go back to the well way too often. And that's kind of what I was harping on just now after I kind of got off into a tangent with it. But he has a tendency to go back to plays that either worked or didn't work, but he'll do it so many times that they won't work for long. So what I don't understand about it is, his playbook is bigger than he shows, because he's run different plays that we've seen over the course of the last 2 years. But again, he doesn't incorporate everything together in like a fluid manner. It's like, well, let's beat this a bunch of times now, like this toss play, or let's run 100 screens in this game because I think that's the way to exploit this defense. But the thing is he's just so stubborn in that idea to where he wasn't willing to make changes or to adapt to what wasn't working with something that would. And I don't know if it's that he wasn't willing or if he wasn't able, but it was one of the two, and either way, it got him fired. So what's your thoughts, Tim?
So before I get into that, there's two things I want to mention. Number one, I feel like our show is officially official, Jeff. Don Burr, the resident Detroit Lions fan, has joined in the chat. So if you guys don't know, Don Burr, he's all over CHGO. He's all over GTF. He's on Bears Now. He's all over Bears YouTube channels. And I feel like we are officially a show of Don Burr has joined in on our channel. So, Don, you like a bad team, but welcome in, and I appreciate you joining us. And I also wanted to point, Cliff asked a question about what's the status with Ian Cunningham. So I just wanted to go, as far as I know, the only open position that he has interviewed for or is interviewing for now is the LA Chargers, because Washington has gone in another direction. So, but to join in on what you were talking about, Jeff, breath of fresh air. It's a nice new start. I'm excited. Whether or not you felt like Eberflus should be the head coach still or not, there were so many people that wanted Jim Harbaugh so badly, but for everything that I've heard from people that I trust, including Greg Gabriel, who has spoken on this numerous times, Jim Harbaugh is not coming to the NFL. And even if he did, I don't think he's coming to Chicago. Like we've talked about before, we don't feel like the McCaskies even like Jim, and he's kind of nutty, and that's not the kind of person that they want in the building. It's just not their style. So, but to get away from that now, Getsy, for all intents and purposes, just didn't know how to call a game. It was evident from the very beginning. The difference was last year, towards the end of the season, we started to see him try to play to players' strengths more and got out of his own scheme to a point. And the thing is with it, he was brought in to run that Shanahan scheme, and yet we saw a shell of that scheme, and it was almost as if he didn't know how to get away from it. He only knew how to play players in that scheme, not necessarily play to the strengths of the players in that scheme. And all it takes is just to change your play calling a little bit, maybe mix in some things, but he just, like you said, he kept going to the well, kept going to the well, kept going to the well. And it was always things, teams can see it before it's even happening. I could see it as a fan. I'm not a scout. I'm not a GM. I'm not a coach. I'm not a player. Never have been any of those things. And I could tell before the play even happened what was going to happen. And how many times do we call it? We'd be on the phone with each other or texting each other and say, hey, this is what's going to happen here. Oh, here comes the screen here. It's 2nd and 10. Here comes the screen. Or 2nd and 9. Here comes a run. It was obvious what he was going to do every time. And, you know, it's a large pool of candidates, I believe, that could come in here now and do a better job than Getsy. And, you know, we've talked about how we thought it should be an experienced play caller and that's the direction they would go. But I don't necessarily think that's obvious as long as you find the right guy. Luke Getsy never had any experience, not even just calling plays, but he was a quarterback's coach, and that's what got him the promotion. But he was the quarterback's coach in Green Bay, and as we all know, he was not coaching Aaron Rodgers. He may have been giving him points here and there, but Aaron Rodgers was already established. He'd already been established. As a matter of fact, Aaron Rodgers' best days were pretty much over by the time that Luke Getsy got there. His peak was over, I should say. Maybe not, you know, he's still playing at a high level at that time, but his peak days were over. So if that's what you were using, and I understand that they wanted to go with the scheme, and I don't know if there just weren't other connections with that scheme with Eberflus and other coaches, or if he just was enamored with Luke Getsy. But for whatever reason, at least at this point in time, we know for sure that there are other candidates out there that are better fits and know how to run the scheme better, know how to play call better, in my opinion. And I'm so happy. And I talked to you about this earlier. I was impressed and happy and surprised all at the same time that the first two names that were stated were Shane Waldron and Clint Kubiak. Two guys who, if I had to put in a list of my top 5 to 10 candidates, they would both be in it. Because, again, successful play calling from Waldron, for sure. He did it with Geno Smith, who was, as far as everybody else concerned, a wash, a bust. His career was over. And he walked in, called plays and resurged Geno Smith's career. And Clint Kubiak, if nothing else, he's been working under Kyle Shanahan. And as we've seen over the last few years, that's kind of the hot, I don't want to say necessarily the hot tree, but the guys who have worked with Shanahan in San Francisco have gone on to be OCs and head coaches and have had a ton of success early, immediate success, like McDaniel, immediate success, O'Connell, immediate success. So no matter which, I'm sorry, not O'Connell. O'Connell came from Sean McVay, but regardless, point being, they're having some success early. And Kubiak, like Greg talked about on GTF earlier, he Gary Kubiak and Mike Shanahan created this offense. So you'd be getting it from the source. That is huge because he has seen every part of this scheme from so many different places. If anybody knows how to use this scheme, it's Kubiak. Even if he's never called plays before, he knows the scheme in and out. He knows what works and what doesn't work at what times. And being with Shanahan and seeing how he calls plays, you could make an argument, and I would say it's the most likely fair argument, that Kyle Shanahan's the best play caller in the NFL. And it's probably by a wide margin. He's a very, very, very good play caller. And these guys that have been working with him have seen this every day. They've worked with this guy, and they understand what works in what situations. Now, granted, San Francisco has an unbelievable roster of talent. But, regardless of that, we've got a pretty talented roster as well, even on the offensive side of the ball. Now, we are like at least one wide receiver away. We could definitely use some other weapons in there, a few pieces on the offensive line. But outside of that, it's a pretty solid roster, and the defense is pretty well set for the most part. There's a few pieces here and there as well. But as far as this team showed that they could be a playoff team this year, you bring in an experienced, maybe not even experienced, but an offensive coordinator who has pedigree, who knows the scheme in and out. I feel like the sky is the limit. And that includes with Justin Fields as quarterback. I especially feel that way with Justin Fields as a quarterback, especially now that he's been in this system for 2 years and he's been able to figure out the little things that he had to learn right off the bat, like footwork and, route concepts and all of those different things. Now that he's got 2 years in with it, it's a pretty telling sign, in my opinion.
I mean, I'll just say this, like I said, Getsy was obviously a problem. He was obviously an issue. There was an issue with play calling. There was an issue with game planning. The first scripted drives of the game were usually pretty good. I mean, they would have success with their first drive a lot of times because it's been scripted and worked on all week long. But when it came to having to improvise and calling plays based on situational football, it was like he coached with scared intentions. He was scared to call plays in those situations, both when he had the lead and when he was down, in situations where it caused for him to call play. I guess what I'm trying to say is in situations where he had to call plays where the game was on the line, he struggled and he called scared. I feel like he was in fear is kind of what it was. And, there's a lot of coaches. I think you said this, Tim, there's a lot of coaches out there that know this scheme, that run this scheme. And it doesn't have to be Luke Getsy in order for this to work. And it just because you change coordinators doesn't mean that everything is going to, be so difficult for everybody in the offense now, learning a new system, learning a new language, all this stuff, because that's not going to be the case. They've got a new person coming in, but he's going to run the same style of offense because that's what they're looking to do, is that Shanahan style offense. And I think Greg mentioned this on GTF earlier today, is both these guys that they've requested interviews with, Waldron and Kubiak, obviously are in that style of offense. Kubiak is the really obvious one because both his dad Gary Kubiak was like an innovator in this offense and part of the, establishment of this offense, along with Mike Shanahan, who is Kyle's dad. And Waldron is a disciple of both of those. I don't know about both those guys, but he's a disciple of that scheme also. I don't know exactly all of his stops that he's been at in the past, but that's the style that he runs. And he's been a fantastic play caller. If anybody hasn't been paying attention to what he's done and gotten some in-depth looks on him, he does a really good job in his play calling. And I reposted, there was a video that somebody else that I follow had posted. I can't remember who it was now, of Shane Waldron's play calling. And I think it was Colt McCoy who was breaking it down. I'm actually 100% sure it was Colt McCoy now who was breaking it down. And it was just, some of the stuff he's done in one of the games in particular was the Cleveland game that they played in. And when they won that game, and it was how well he called that game and how well they played offensively and executed. And I think, we see a guy like that coming. I would be happy with Waldron. And honestly, I would be happy with Kubiak too. I believe he's the passing game coordinator with the 49ers, and Waldron's the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks right now. But as most of you know, Pete Carroll just left. I'm sorry, well, he didn't leave. They moved on from him, mutually parted, whatever they want to call it, to bring in a new guy, and he's going to take on another position with the Seahawks. So the coaching staff is free to look at other positions, other opportunities, because they're going to bring in a new head coach. So they request to interview Waldron. They still have to request to interview him because he's still an employee with the Seahawks right now. So the Bears request to interview him, and when they talk to him, if they like him and if he likes the situation, there's a good chance he comes over. Same with Kubiak. Now, there's other names that have yet to be named yet and will be interviewed. I'm sure there's several that will still be interviewed, and I'd be interested to see who some of those names are. Tim and I have talked in the past about Pep Hamilton, as most of you guys know. I don't know if he'll be interviewed or not. I would expect he probably will be, but I don't know for sure. And there's some other names. As I just mentioned, Greg Gabriel several times already. He mentioned a guy before a couple times on some of his other episodes named, I believe his name's Liam Cohen. He's a coach with Kentucky right now, but he's very familiar with the Shanahan offense. He's been around it for a long time now. He's bounced back and forth with, I believe, the Rams, and he was with Kentucky right now and some other team. I think he's been with the Rams twice, but he's another guy who's a potential option there who could be interviewed. I would not be surprised to see him be interviewed. So what I will say is, guys, I would totally expect if I was a Bears fan, which I am, what I'm saying is I would expect all of you guys to expect to see another Shanahan style guy come in and coach this offense, because they're not going to change the offense that much. They just want somebody who can actually coach it and run it and can make the personnel better and can teach it and not have regressions from guys like Darnell Mooney, who's a 1,000-yard receiver, who has been basically non-existent for 2 years in this offense. And to me, that's kind of the common denominator there, as I've said many times, is Luke Getsy. So I don't know. To me, guys, again, we can say what we want about Fields. We can say what we want about the other players, but the biggest issue offensively to me was Getsy, and they got rid of him. And I've been saying that for weeks now. So, it's not a surprise to me at all that this happened. And I think there's going to be a lot of guys that are interested in this job, as they said in the press conference. And other people have been surprised on Twitter about this and saying things like, well, there's no way anybody's going to have interest in this job because lame duck head coach and all that. And that's just not the case. You can see that there's definitely several people who want to work in this situation. The Bears are trending in the right direction, guys. They're going to be expected to be a playoff team next year. So with all that being said, I don't think you got a guy who's in a lame duck year, because they're expected to win. Yeah, if he doesn't perform, that's a problem. But the idea is to bring in a new offensive coordinator that can help your offense progress with your defense, who has already shown massive strides of progression, who's only going to get better. So if the team continues to grow in that regard and continues to get better, they should win more games. Now, we can all say what we want about the whole Flu situation, whether he should have been fired or not. I'm not going to get into that. All I'm going to say is the defense did improve under him. There have been some in-game in-game decisions that were questionable in several instances, of course.
but he's a growing coach too. And
there were some roster questions too going in.
Well, there are, but again, he's the head coach now. So, and they decided to roll with him. So we might as well support him, and we might as well just hope that he continues to grow and the defense continues to grow and he finds the right offensive coordinator to get this done. So regardless of whether we agree with what happened or not, that's what did happen. And like I said, I mentioned it several podcasts ago now that I expected Flus to probably remain with the team and Getsy would be gone. He was as good as gone. I expected that to happen. And that's what happened. So, and Aldo mentions here in the chat, he's got Darnell Mooney's stats here from 2021. He had 81 catches and 1,055 yards. I believe that was Fields' rookie season. And in that year, he had multiple quarterbacks throwing to him. And everybody thought that Allen Robinson would be like the lead guy that Fields would be throwing to, but that wasn't the case. Mooney was his go-to his rookie year. And again, guys, look at that. He's got 1,055 yards. You know, in the last 2 years, a total of 907. That's mind-boggling to me. You cannot tell me that that's all on the player. That's a 1,000-yard receiver. You don't regress that much on your own. You know, maybe there's some injury issues there. They were kind of lingering. It's hard to say, but to have that much of regression, I should say, that's on the coach. A lot of it's on the coach, I should say. Go ahead, Tim.
Did he even have 20 receptions this year?
I'm sure he had.
Did he even have 20? I don't know.
I'm sure he had at least 20. I would be shocked if he didn't. But, I mean, at the same time, he didn't have a ton, and there was a lot of drops. Okay, 31. There you go. So, like I said, I'd be shocked if he didn't have at least 20. But 31 still is that's pretty bad over 17 games or 16 games. No, it's 17 games. 17 games. That's less than 2 catches a game. So, I mean, just in that alone, guys, I mean, you can say what you want about the quarterback situation and what will and won't happen there, but there's a lot of other players on this offense that either regressed or did not progress in the way that they should have. Yeah, Cole Kmet did. Yeah, some of the offensive linemen did. Guess what? Those 2 coaches were retained. And I mentioned on the show again several weeks ago when Alexis was on that Tyke Tolbert I did not think was going to stick around because they've had too many issues with the receivers. Claypool was a disaster. They've had regressions from Mooney, obviously, like we just talked about. And every receiver outside of DJ Moore did basically nothing. So, again, EQ's been here for 2 years and basically did nothing. He did a really good job blocking, but he was more productive as a receiver with Rodgers.
Yeah, but that's what
again, you can say a lot about that too. But
here for.
Well, I agree with that. But again, you know, he had more production in Green Bay. And again, Rodgers was throwing to him. But still, you got to find ways to make a more personnel-friendly offense for the players that you have. And he didn't do that. So knowing that that was the case, again, there was a lot of stuff involved here, but they had to move on, and they did. So Stingray makes a point here. Instead of switching the first progression, he made more and Kmet the first over and over. And he did do that. He targeted his top guys a lot. And there, you know, you can say whether you agree or disagree with that. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with doing that a lot. And I'm not sure if that was exactly the case, but it did seem that way, that those guys were targeted as the first reads a lot. And Moore, that's an obvious one. He's your best receiver. You're going to target him first as much as you can because he's your best player. So, but again, you got to find ways to get Mooney the football too, because he's a damn good football player and he had 1,000 yards receiving just 3 years ago. So again, we have to remember here that, you know, this is not all on Justin and it's not all on the personnel. There's a lot on the coaching staff here, on the offensive coaching staff, which, by the way, Flus gave total control of, because when he came in, he wanted to be a CEO. So everybody's going to say, yeah, well, he hired these guys. Why doesn't he say, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that? Well, because he gave Getsy the keys to the car, in essence, in my opinion, is why he hasn't done those things. That being said, now he has moved on from him. He made the decision, but now he does have a key call to make here about who he brings in. So far, I like the interviews that they've requested, but they're not done yet, and we'll see who actually comes in and interviews. Aldo makes another good point in here that Velus Jones, that is, Tyler Scott and EQ all made big blunders in the few chances they got, and that hurt Justin's confidence in them.
And that probably is true. I mean, look how often he didn't look to target. I saw something on Twitter, and I cannot remember who it was that was showing it, but there was a clip of, I don't remember exactly who they were playing, what the route concepts were, or anything like that, but there was a slant, and I remember kind of what was said in the comment now was, this is why Getsy didn't call a lot of slants, because Justin can't throw them. And it showed a slant route. And by the way, guys, the person who was running the slant was Trent freaking Taylor, who is not a receiver. He's a punt returner, okay? And don't even get me started on the blocking assignments he was given throughout the season by Luke Getsy, because that's really insane. But the slant route that was being run was by Trent Taylor. And there was a slight, and I mean slight, window that Fields could have maybe fit this ball into, and he was looking at it. But this is going back to the point that that Aldo just made. How can you trust to throw that ball to that guy there? Do you really think he's going to catch that in that tight window? It's probably going to get picked off. So, excuse me. I don't think he's not making those throws because he can't. It's because he doesn't trust the guys he's throwing to for the most part. So, and Aldo says Trent Taylor is my Gardner. I mean, and to be fair, I mean, the guy, he's not like I said, guys, he's not a receiver. Yeah, he was pretty dependable on punts. He caught every one of them but one. I think he only muffed one punt all season, but we're not looking for guys that just catch punts. Velus was brought in to be a punt returner and to be a dynamic punt returner. Well, he's never returned punts really, and he wasn't very good at it when he was here, and he muffed a bunch of punts when he did that. So what Cliff says, Jeff, everybody has that bug now about my cough. And what's funny is I got sick at Christmas time, and I guess I'm still kind of coughing right now for whatever reason, and I kind of have been. But to get back to my point, yeah, guys, Trent Taylor, again, this goes back to, again, why Getsy was fired. You're asking a guy like Trent Taylor to do things that he shouldn't be doing. Why? First of all, why is he even in there running that slant route on a key down in the first place? Because I'm pretty sure it was a third down situation. Why is he in there in the first place? That makes no sense. No defense is looking at that saying, well, what's he going to do? It doesn't matter. They don't care what he's doing because he's ineffective. So, excuse me. I just don't think there's go ahead.
I'm going to cut you off because
there's a lot to this, but
it was
obvious he had to go. So, go ahead.
So, a couple things I wanted to point out from this too. You know, it's a lot of people are so quick to jump on the things that Fields struggled with, you know, as far as his reads and not pulling the trigger quick enough and all of these different things. But let's talk about the Velus Jones, Tyler Scott's, Trent Taylor, Equanimeous St. Brown, and the biggest blunder of all when they brought in Bobby Tunyon. What did he do all year? The guy has caught 60 balls 2 years in a row in Green Bay. With Getsy there, he was a 60-catch player. Comes here, does nothing. And the chances that he was given, wide open, should have been touchdown. There hasn't been a more perfectly thrown ball all year. It was on the money, just flat dropped. And these things happen. How many times this year did we see that happen where guys just dropping passes? The ball to Tyler Scott that, yes, he had to extend, but that ball was on the money, right where it needed to be, over the shoulder.
That was some kind of throw there.
That ball.
That was some kind of throw there on that. Go ahead.
How many times did we see that? How many times did we see that? So many times over the season, we saw that exact same thing where you saw Justin's arm talent. You saw him giving his team a chance to win. And then you saw the same thing over and over and over again. If he wasn't going to DJ Moore, it was probably even DJ Moore himself dropped, 2 or 3 balls in big moments this year. There were a couple different times. Now, there was also a couple of times where they were tough catches.
I was going to say, Starkey makes a comment here too, Tim, that Tyler Scott dropped 2 touchdowns in the Falcons game, and one of those was another just a dime in the back of the end zone from DJ Moore. That if he'd have been able to make that play, which was tough, defender got his hand in there. But if Scott has strong enough hands to make that, I mean, everybody's talking about that throw for weeks because that throw was beautiful.
And, you know, we'd have had another score in that game from that. So,
well, they also said the way that he went to it. Yeah. And they also said the way he went for the ball, if he had taken the route the correct way or the way he'd reached out, timed his reach out, it would have been right in his hands. And these are the things that we've seen all year long. So again, this is not just, and you know, that stuff's not on Getsy either. But at the same time, like if you're going to put these things on Justin, let's talk about the entire offense. Let's talk about everything as a whole. You're telling me that, to me, it doesn't matter if you've got Justin Fields in there or if you bring Caleb Williams in. It doesn't matter if you're having the same problems with your skill position players. Not to mention, though, let's go into this too. There were times that the running game just completely disappeared this year. Completely. And that was, I don't think that was, we had a good running back room. Those guys were still getting their chunk yards when they were getting the ball. They would just get away from it completely. Or he would stick with one guy at a time. I never understood that. You would have games where Herbert blew up the final 2 games and a few games sprinkled in here and there. Same thing with Deontay Foreman, you know, and Roschon had a few good games here and there too. But for whatever reason, they could not get these guys, more of a committee approach like we thought was going to happen, or at least go with a hot hand at certain times. And it almost just disappeared because he would stick with one guy. And there were so many times. Cliff asks here, why was Foreman a healthy scratch for so many games? I don't have the answer to that. The only thing I can come up with is Herbert was healthy, and he's the best of the 3 running backs, in my opinion, as far as running the football. And he's developed nicely as a pass catcher, and his run blocking has pass blocking is much improved over last year. And so I kind of think that maybe that had something to do with it.
I was going to say, I do have an opinion on that myself too, Tim, on the Foreman situation. So Cliff, I mean, and this is total speculation on my part, but in my opinion, I feel like when they signed Foreman, it was before the draft, so they didn't know what was going to happen in the draft. And when the draft came around and Roschon basically fell into their laps there, they loved the kid and they took him. So now you've got both these guys on the roster, and they're both kind of a similar style, thunder kind of running style, you know, whereas Herbert's more like the lightning, find a hole and burst kind of thing, you know, and he's got really good vision and really good cutting ability and those kinds of things, whereas Roschon and Foreman are going to hit the hole and they're going to hit it hard, and they're going to, you know, they're going to knock some guys over in the process. So I feel like, and Foreman is not a good pass blocker either. He's just not. He's not a good pass protector. And
I was going to say, Roschon is probably the best of the 3.
He is, and Roschon is the best pass protector in the group, and Herbert is a better pass protector than he has been in the past, but he's still not very good either. So, in my opinion, that's part of the reason why Foreman was scratched as much as he did, is because he's not a good pass protector, and because they've got Roschon, who they're trying to develop, and they've got Herbert, who is a different style of back who they want in the game also. So that's kind of the reason why it happened. And then when he did play due to injuries and he had to play, he played really well. So, I mean, I don't think it's anything against Foreman. There's just situations in the Bears circumstances that caused him to not be able to play as much as he probably should have. And I don't think he'll be back either.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But I do agree that I think that I saw somebody made a comment on here that running back is a sneaky position for the draft. I agree. I think it very well could be. And if they do what I hope they do, and I will be so happy if they draft Audric Estime, that would be a massive, massive, massive upgrade at running back. You're looking at a bell cow now. You're looking at the most polished running back in college football walking into the draft as far as running and pass pro and pass catching out of the backfield. He's probably number 1, and it's by a wide margin. He's actually probably one of the most pro-ready running backs we've seen in a long time as far as pass protection goes. He's very, very good in that regard. And he's an absolute bruiser, and it takes a lot to bring him down. You want to comp? David Montgomery, but on steroids and much bigger.
Taller, again, for sure.
Like, I think Aldo's getting ready to pull up some estimate here. Yes, taller for sure. just very here. Look at this burst of speed, even after it's crazy for his size, how he can just burst and accelerate at the rate of speed that he does. Now, I don't think he's going to wow anybody with his 40 time, but you can see he's football fast, and there's a big difference in that. And he can absolutely take off and just burn people behind him. But, again, I do think that can be something they look at in the draft, and we'll get into some more of that stuff in the coming weeks here when we really start diving into the draft and players that we really like. But again, to go back to this conversation, I really, it's very telling in a lot of different ways how this is all panned out and how we saw with the personnel and how it was being used and guys regressing right and left and how receivers weren't developing. And I'll say it this much, Tyke Tolbert was fired and the receivers didn't do a whole lot, but Tyke Tolbert has had an incredible career as a wide receivers coach. You're going to tell me that all of a sudden he doesn't know how to coach receivers anymore? I think a lot of it has to do with just the scheme, just the offense in general sucked as far as play calling in the scheme. It was terrible. So, I'm seeing a comment here. I want to comment really quick. Keith Harris says, add the running back from Notre Dame with Johnson. Herbert could be scary. I 100% agree, because you're talking Herbert gives that burst of lightning speed, hit the hole and take off. And Estime is just a freaking animal. So yes, I agree. That'd be great. But anyway, sorry to get off subject for a second, but yeah, again, it's so telling in so many ways how this all panned out in the end. And it wasn't rocket science. We could see it as casual fans. So if we can see it, you think Ryan Poles can't see it? You think Matt Eberflus can't say it? And I thought it was very telling in the press conference when asked about Justin Fields and asked about Luke Getsy. Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus both gave rave reviews on Justin Fields and how they really liked how he grew this season, and they could see the development, how he was able to slow things down, how he was able to get through his progressions, how he was able to start pulling the trigger, how he was able to start hitting guys in open windows and actually take the chance, how he hit on several connections downfield, the arm accuracy on the deep ball, the arm talent, the running ability, all of these different things that he mentioned that they loved from Fields. And then when they were asked about Luke Getsy, we got the offense just didn't develop how we wanted it to. There wasn't a thank you. There wasn't he did some great things this year, and we really appreciate his time and what he was able to do and how he helped develop Justin Fields or how he helped develop the offense. There was none of that, which is very telling to me that they clearly saw what the problem was, the main problem. Everybody had a hand in it, including Justin Fields this year. Don't disagree with that at all. But it's painfully obvious what the biggest problem was of the entire offense. And that's in the name, offensive coordinator. That was your job. Regardless of anything else, you're the leader of the offense. Just like Matt Eberflus is the leader of the team. You're the leader of the offense. It is on you when the offense fails. So again, we've been going on and on and on about this, but again, it's something we knew was going to happen. I'm glad that it happened. Some people wanted to see it happen early in the season. That was never going to happen, but I'm glad that it happened and we are able to move on. And I'm really happy with the candidates that we've brought in. And just to piggyback off that a little bit, I'm also very interested in what they do with quarterback coach, because, I like the offensive coordinators they're bringing in, but at the same time, I'd like to see a quarterback coach who's played quarterback in the NFL. Why do we struggle to bring these guys in? I don't understand. There are several guys that right now would take a job that have proven to have success with developing quarterbacks. We're talking Tim Jenkins, JT O'Sullivan. You're telling me that if you wave some money in front of these guys, they wouldn't take the Chicago Bears quarterback coaching job? Absolutely, they would. Both of them. Tim Jenkins is on record on Twitter saying that he would take that job. Chase Daniel, I was listening to him yesterday, and it was almost a joke, but he threw his hat out there to be the quarterback coach for Justin Fields in Chicago. And, all of these, it's so funny because all of these guys who are QB evaluators all come out and saying, hey, stick with Justin Fields. stick with Justin Fields. For one, you don't have to start over. Two, you know the floor. You don't even know where the ceiling's at yet, but you at least know where the floor's at. You don't know what you're going to get with Caleb Williams or any quarterback for that matter that you draft. You're starting over. You're committing to losing off the bat, almost guaranteed. And every single person that I've heard that has done quarterback evaluations for this draft class has said every one of these quarterbacks is a work in progress. None of them are going to come in here pro-ready immediately, which is very telling to me. So, again, why in the world would you leave it? And Starkey Love puts down here, Chase Daniels drooling to be JF1's coach. 100% agree. He's been on the bandwagon all year. I shouldn't say bandwagon, but he's been a fan of it all year. We listen to his breakdowns, and he's not afraid to point out the flaws, but he also sees the strengths. And there are things that I don't even see, and I watch his breakdowns, and I'm like, wow, that was even better than what I thought it was, or that situation, I didn't realize that's what's going on here, but that was good stuff from Justin. Like, it just shows the intelligence and the player and the person. And again, I would love to see that. Let's bring in a former quarterback who's played the position in the NFL. Chase Daniel would be a great one because he's had 17 seasons as an NFL quarterback, backup quarterback or not. He spent a lot of times in a lot of offenses, learned a lot of things, has seen quarterbacks develop. He's played behind some really, really, really good ones. Why not give a guy like that a chance? So that's something I would like to see. But again, it depends on the OC, but I would also love to see what they do with the quarterback coach, because that could also, be the deciding factor in the quarterback development.
Yeah, I was just going to say, first of all, guys, I see a lot of questions in the comments there. Keep them coming because we will answer them here pretty quick. We don't have much time left in the show, but I don't want to go too much more into the offense situation and the coordinator and all that, because we've spent a lot of time on it. And I think we should get into a little bit of this draft situation, this unique draft situation we're in, because I do see some comments here about Justin. And I did see one or two about, the Bears having to move on and draft a quarterback because of the situation they're in. There's a couple things that I wanted to say about all this before we get started here. And that's, first of all, and Greg mentioned this on GTF earlier, in the press conference yesterday, there were several votes of confidence for Justin. Okay. And Tim and I talked about this on the phone earlier. When Poles, first of all, there was a comment Poles made about Justin and how he has grown a lot and that he feels good about him leading the team. And I mentioned to Tim on the phone earlier, he didn't have to say that. There's a lot of things that he could have said that didn't have to be that. That's a vote of confidence to say that about the kid. All he could have said was, or he had to say was something like, yeah, we have a lot of options this offseason and Justin's one of them. And that's all he had to say. And then everybody would have been like, well, he's not saying anything about Justin there. But he didn't say that. He said, yeah, he's grown a lot, and I feel good about his ability to lead this team. So I feel like he's telling the truth when he says that. And that being said, he's going to do his due diligence and do his job. But he also basically said, I don't want to say the same thing I said last year, but I do have to basically be blown away by another quarterback to move in that direction. And guys, I don't think it's just about on-field play. He's mentioned time and time again about the football character, about the man, about the person. And I don't want to say anything about any of these other guys that are in the draft right now because I don't know anything about them, about their character, about their football character, about the person that they are. I haven't had the time to spend around them. I haven't done the extensive research on those guys because I'm not around them. But we can see, because Justin has been here in Chicago, about his football character, about the man that he is. And we don't have doubts about that with Justin Fields. His intangibles are through the roof. And honestly, there's a lot of potential on the football field that other guys just cannot do that we have in Justin Fields, that we have seen. And there's more that can be unlocked there that we can get from him. And he has shown a ton of growth. So especially the second half of the season, he really grew a lot, in my opinion. And he showed a lot of improvement in a lot of different areas that people are tearing him apart for early in the season. There was a lot of throws he missed early in the year by either not seeing him or he was staring him down and just decided not to throw. He was taking a ton of sacks. Things were just not looking good early on. But guys, he really did show a ton of improvement late in the season and looked really, really good especially in certain spots late in the year. And Poles mentioned in the presser Wednesday, that he does want to see improvement from Justin in the 2-minute drill, in the 2-minute offense. And I agree with that because, there were struggles at the end of the game where we had chances to put teams away that Justin missed out on. It wasn't all him. There was a lot of play calling issues. And I go back to, and I don't want to keep harping this drum with the play calling thing, but I do real quick want to go back to that week 2 game against Tampa when we had a chance to win at the end of the game. And this is when, a lot of people first started coming off Justin's off his bandwagon, I guess you could say. There's the drive at the end of the game, and everybody in the world knew what was coming. That Getsy was going to run another stupid freaking screen pass, and that's exactly what he did, and it got picked off, and I think it was a pick 6, if I'm not mistaken, and they won the game right then and there. So it ended it for the Bears. And a lot of people blame Justin for the throw, but, I mean, yeah, it wasn't a great throw, and you could say that he shouldn't have made that throw in the first place, but the play call was terrible. And, so a lot of these things aren't all on Justin is the point I was trying to make here. So, again, we do need to see some improvement from Justin in a lot of different areas. But like I said before, guys, there's things that this dude does on the football field that other people just cannot do. The tackles that he breaks, scrambling in and out of the pocket, is just unbelievable. I have never in my life seen anything like it. And if I haven't seen anything like it in my 34 years of watching football, I doubt many of you guys have either. So, when you have a guy like that and has shown you an ability to get better as he has, and to lead his team, and his teammates love him, and his fans love him, and the city loves him. Yeah, he's got detractors, of course. There's plenty of people that don't like him. And Cliff makes a good point here. Mahomes makes some bad throws too. Every quarterback makes bad throws. But, we just have to continue to see improvement from the kid. And we all know he's extremely accurate down the field. I bet he didn't miss five throws downfield all season. I bet he did not miss 5 throws downfield all season. That all the ones that he actually threw and made, that he connected on all, but I bet he didn't miss 5 of them, is my point. So, knowing that, and the fact that he is pretty damn accurate to most areas of the field. There were some issues with accuracies in the short passes and stuff like that. To me, he got better with that late in the season too, guys. He was making more accurate passes with screens and things like that because they were doing them so much. He was kind of forced to. But I don't want to beat the drum on all this for too long. But guys, we are in a unique situation with these quarterbacks at the top of the draft and having the number 1 pick. And like I said just now, we know everything about Justin's character. We don't know everything about these guys' character, so we kind of have to let it play out and let these guys, let the front office dig in and find out what they want to find out. But I'm telling you guys, Greg's been beating the drum about this for a long time now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it either. I really do think that they're going to end up moving down. And how far down they're going to move, I'm not sure. I would like to see him move down to like 3 and get Marvin Harrison. That's like my dream scenario. I don't know how you guys all feel about that, but in any case, I do feel like they're going to move down and they're going to try to get as much capital as they can. I think a first rounder next year and a second rounder this year is an absolute must. They're probably going to ask for either another first round pick or another established player, depending on who they draft with. And you see, and Aldo's got a list here on the screen of all the teams that are at the top. Washington's number 2, New England's number 3, Arizona's at 4, the Chargers are at 5, Giants at 6, Tennessee at 7, Atlanta at 8, and then the Bears are again at 9. So you look at the top 8 teams there, the teams that actually need quarterbacks here. We're looking at Washington most likely wants a quarterback. New England for sure, I would say, in their situation needs a quarterback. Arizona's probably going to stick with Murray. Chargers have their quarterback. Giants are probably looking to get a quarterback. Tennessee's probably looking to get a quarterback. Well, they might want to ride with their guy right now. What's his name? I can't think of his last name now. Will Levis. They're probably, I don't know if they're going to want to stick with him or not, but they're possibly going to look for a quarterback. And Atlanta is likely looking for a quarterback. So all that being said, guys, there's some teams in there who could be looking to move up with Chicago to get a quarterback. And some of those teams may be willing to part with some significant assets. I mean, and if Atlanta wants to move up from 8 and they're going to say, hey, we'll give you guys Drake London, a first rounder this year, first rounder next year, second rounder this year, and more, I'm thinking about that. I really am. If I'm the Bears, I'm thinking about that because Drake London's a damn good football player who has not been used well in Atlanta. So, trust me, I've had him for 2 years on my fantasy team. It's been driving me nuts now. But guys, it's like Yeah, Atlanta wants Fields is what Cliff says. They probably do. I mean, everybody who plays against him seems to like him and thinks he's a good football player, and they're scared. They're worried about him because he's dangerous. But then, it's for whatever reason, there's several people that think that he can't make it. He's not the answer, and he's never going to figure it out. And I just don't know that I agree with it. I think that he still can continue to get better and play at a higher level than he has, and he's going to get better. I mean, and here's the other thing I wanted to say before I move it over to Tim. Is another like a point of, I guess, conviction is what that's not the word I'm looking for, but Flus was talking about in the press conference yesterday about Fields as well. And he talked about how he's continued to grow. And I think he had a little bit of a slip up when he said this statement about how he expects Fields to continue to grow as the team continues to grow. And that was a little weird to me that he said that. Why would you say you expect Fields to continue to grow as the team continues to grow if he's not going to be here next year? Because if he's played his last football game last year, he's not going to grow with the team. He's going to grow with some other team. So to me, that that's hard to say. So that being said, we're actually really short on time here, guys. So I hate to not give you a chance to rebuttal me here, Tim. But we got to get some questions here if we got some to get answered. So. Let's see what we got here. There's a question here from Cliff. Who picks the lesser offense coaches? Poles, Flus, or the new offensive coordinator? He's talking about who's going to decide who are the other staff coaches, like the position coaches. In my opinion, Cliff, I think they'll leave most of that to the position to the offensive coordinator they bring in, because they've already got two position coaches lined up for them. They're probably going to say, go ahead and pick whoever you want for the rest of your season. And he's gonna have guys he wants to bring in anyways. Most coordinators do, probably all of them are gonna have guys they want to bring in with them. So I do anticipate him filling out most of his own staff.
Agreed.
So
yep, I 100% agree with that. Would
knowing
what the offensive identity will be, have any decision on who we draft at wide receiver 1? I believe that has to be the conversation with potential new OC. Yes, I do, to a point, because we've still not seen that X receiver that they want. I'm going to call it now, and I'm going to be crazy for doing this, but I'm going to do it. I called it last year. I said Darnell Wright would be our first-round pick, and we took Darnell Wright. I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to end up in Chicago. The only way that happens is if we go down to 2 or 3. I like Rome Odunze. Honestly, of the 3 wide receivers, the big ones, he's actually the one I like the most because of the yak and the size and the speed and the downhill ability and the route running. He is a polished player all around, and he just dominated in every game this season. The kid is a monster. He's going to be very, very, very good. I really like Odunze. That's the one that if I had the choice, I'd go with Odunze. And I think he can be picked up, in the middle, early first round, like 8, 9, 10. So
I think he's going top 10. Yeah. I was just going to say, I do agree with Tim. The one point I want to make, Keith, is that I feel like, and I've been saying this for a while now, the Bears need an X. We don't have an X receiver. They wanted Claypool to be an X, and it didn't work out there. So they need that guy who's big, who can play on the boundary and be that big, tall X receiver. Harrison could be that guy. He's got that kind of size. Odunze could be that guy. He's got that kind of size. A lot of guys like Neighbors, but he's not an X. He doesn't have – Neighbors is damn good, guys. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see Neighbors with the Bears, but
he's not an X. He could more, but I'd be okay with having 2 DJ Moores. I'd be fine with that.
That's kind of why – I do like Odunze a lot, though, because of the fact that he can be an X, and he's going to be somewhere in the top 10, and I would not be surprised to see the Bears go that direction. I really do love Marvin Harrison. I like it. Like you said, though, Tim, I would be kind of surprised to see that happen, just because if they move down, they're going to move down probably further than 2 or 3, and they'll probably miss out on him. So, like I said, I do love Neighbors, guys. Don't get me wrong, but I do think they need an X, and I think that's going to play a part in the decision making in the draft. So. Yeah, that's what I would say there.
Like Keon Coleman, too. Yeah, I like him, too, Mr. Mayhem. I like Keon Coleman as well. I'd be okay with any of those guys. I think any of them any of those guys will help DJ Moore in the offense in general. So not everybody's on DJ, but yes, any of those guys. Aldo's asking, were you guys happy when Poles said Jalen was coming back? Happy's not the word, Aldo. I would say that I was ecstatic. And honestly, I think I felt that way anyway, that he was going to stay. Now, does that mean he's getting a contract extension? Not necessarily. But it does mean he's going to be here this year, which guarantees at least the franchise tag. But I do think the contract is coming because he finished the year even better than I think because of the season that he had, that locked up his contract. It's just a money thing now, getting the money situation figured out.
Before I answer that question, I want to say something about Starkey's comment here. He thinks if the Bears move to 3 that Washington would take Harrison. And I disagree, Starkey, simply because of the fact that I think they're going to go quarterback. I think regardless of, I mean, they've got a top 2 pick right now. They've been in desperate need of a quarterback for a long time. They're in a unique situation to take one. I think there's no way they don't go quarterback. Howell's okay, but I mean, like I said, you're in a situation where Howell's not Justin Fields, guys. Okay. So to me, I think they're going quarterback there. I don't think there's any question about it. So
brand new GM, he's taking a quarterback.
But I do want to mention with Aldo's comment about or question about Jalen Johnson. I was extremely happy to see that because I mean, you guys saw how the defense play, how they cover in the secondary when he's not there. The pass rush doesn't get home. They don't hold up in the back end. They just don't play anywhere near as well when he's not there. And he even said himself on a couple, I think it was on a radio show he was on, I think it was like 670. He was talking about there was a couple of throws that Green Bay made in that game that he does not think they would have made if he was playing because they're not going to take those chances on those throws with him there. So, it's just how I see it, guys. I mean, Jalen being back and Poles saying that he's going to be back was huge to me. I mean, just the fact that he came out and actually said he's going to be back after Jalen said, I expect to be back. So they're going to work something out, and that is huge to me. So I love to see that. And guys like Terrell Smith played really well, but I don't think he's a starter. I think he's a really good depth piece and a guy who can come in and play football when you need him to. But he got exposed a little bit when he was forced to play in a starting role. So, and he is a rookie. He's a 5th-round rookie. But again, guys, he's a 5th-round pick. So, and you got Jalen Johnson. You don't move on from that for Terrell Smith, who's a 5th-round rookie. You just don't. So, I feel like it was a good thing that we hear that he's going to get paid and he's going to stick around. So, I'm happy to hear that. And there is a comment here too that Aldo makes about Caleb Williams. And this is funny because I wouldn't be surprised either. He says, don't be surprised if Caleb Williams talks and behaves his way out of the top 5 picks. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if we see him Bo Callahan in draft day kind of situation, The guy just, for whatever reason, he's got some stuff going on where he's like, people are just like, I'm done with this. I'm not dealing with that. I can't have that in my franchise. Now, that being said, I doubt it'll happen just because, I mean, it only takes one team to say, hey, man, I got to have that talent. Those throws I'm seeing right there, I got to have that on my football team. And, they're going to make that decision to bring him in. So, that's kind of how I see it. But, yeah. And one more question here I'll answer before we get out of here because we're running out of time. Keith asks, is it Higgins, wide receiver at Cincinnati, that becomes a free agent who could fill the X receiver role? He's talking about T. Higgins with the Bengals. First of all, I don't think they're going to let him walk again. I mean, they just franchise tagged him last year with already Jamar Chase on the other side. I would guess they're not going to let him move on, that they will find a way to work out a deal with him to get him to stick around. But, yeah, he could be an X receiver. He does have that kind of size. He could play it. He could play the X for the Bears. I don't know what kind of blocker he is, though, and the Bears are going to ask him to do that. So regardless of who the offensive coordinator is, with the scheme that they run, because that's the kind of scheme they're going to run, the 2 coordinators they've already asked to talk to run the same scheme they do. They're going to ask the receivers to block. So that's just how I would say. And there's one more question. Let's take real quick before we get this one. Go ahead,
I want to
Tim.
answer this one. Notorious asks, would you guys take 2 safeties in this draft? I was looking at Bishop and Hicks in the 3rd round. Yes, I think they are taking 2 safeties in this draft. And the reason I say 2, Poles has shown that he likes to double down on a position when he knows we need that position of need. And I do think Eddie Jackson's days in Chicago are probably over unless he takes a team-friendly deal. And regardless of that, they're going to draft for his replacement. So, yes, I do think they draft safety. And yes, I do think they take 2 because he does double down to make sure that he gets a guy, if not multiple guys. So yes, agreed.
I totally agree with that. I think he'll double down at safety. They'll both be ball hawking, rangy safeties that can move and play in the back end. So,
but they also got to be able to hit. They got to be able to hit.
They'll double dip there, and I think they'll double dip on the offensive line too, like interior, like at center, because they have a serious need there. And I think they'll bring one in free agency also, a vet who can play the position. So that's just my 2 cents on that part. But I totally agree with Tim. I do think they'll double down at safety in the draft, because that's what Poles has done in the past with need positions. So that being said, guys, we got to get out of here. We're running out of time, but it was a great show today for our first one back. Hopefully next week we have a guest for you guys. We're not sure who that's going to be yet, but next week we'll be back same time, 3:50, 4 o'clock my time. It'll be 5:50, 6 p.m. Central Time. My time gets messed up being on the Pacific Coast out here, guys. But anyways, next week we'll be back, same time. We appreciate you guys as always, and we love how you guys are always asking questions on here for us to answer, and it's always a good time with that kind of stuff. So again, we appreciate you guys, and give us a follow at Barroom Network, at JAW0235, at Tim Willis 24. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you as always. Bear down.
See you later.